I'm going to show you how you can enable shadow copies on previous versions for a drive on Windows Server 2022. So to start, I'm going to open up my File Explorer, and I've got my data drive, which has all of the data for my server, which I want to create shadow copies for on previous versions. So what we can do is we can right-click the drive and go to Properties, and then go to Shadow Copies, and then make sure we have selected the drive which has our data on. We can then press Settings, and we can see under the Settings window we've got our volume, which is the E drive, which is the drive that has our data on. And then for storage area, this is where we want to store the shadow copies. Microsoft recommends that you don't store it on the same drive and you store it on a second drive. So I've created another drive called Backups, which I'm going to store my data on. For the size limit, you can either set no limit and it will just take up as much storage as is available, or you can use a limit for how much storage the shadow copies can use, and then once it hits that limit, it will just rotate out the oldest ones. So I'm going to set this as 2 gig. Now for a schedule, if we press the schedule, we can see that there are 2 schedules that have already been created. The first one is it will create a shadow copy every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday at 7 AM. And then the same again on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday at 12 PM. Now you can either amend these, or what I do is just press delete and get rid of them and then create my own. Now the actual schedule that you create is entirely up to you. What I generally do is change this to weekly, select every weekday, and I have a start time as 7 AM. And then under advanced, we can then tick repeat task, and I have it doing it every 2 hours until 7 PM. I just set that to 2 minutes past so that it can start the 7 PM copy, and then it won't do any more after that until it gets back to the 7 AM scheduled start time. And then press OK, and then press OK. I can then press OK on this settings window, and then that has now enabled our shadow copy. So then, as we are currently outside of this time, it's not going to do any automatically, but as soon as 7 AM comes around, it will create some shadow copies for us. What you can do is create a manual shadow copy by just pressing Create Now, and that will create a shadow copy as soon as you press it. So I'll just close this window temporarily, and if I refresh my File Explorer, we can see on the backups that the size in use has increased, but if we go in there, it's blank because even though we've got hidden items shown, it's a hidden file share. Now to actually access the backups, there are 2 ways of doing it. You can right click the data drive, and go to Properties, and then go to Previous Versions. And this will show you all of the previous versions that are available. So if I just come back to the shadow copies and then quickly create some more. Once I refresh this, it will show us all of the previous versions that are available. Obviously this will be every 2 hours during business hours. And then to access them, you can just double click into it and it will basically take you to the copy. And then you can just drill down and access any of the files. These are blank. And then you can just either right click and copy it, or just drag it to the desktop and then restore it manually. Or what you can do is you can come into the file share, go to any of the files, and then you can right click it and go to Properties and then Previous Versions. Now you'll notice this is blank. The reason it is blank is because the file hasn't changed during any of the shadow copies. So if I make a quick change to this and put test and then save, and then if we come back to our File Explorer, go to Properties, and then create another shadow copy now, and then close this window. If I right click this document and go to Properties, and then the previous versions, we'll see there is 1 previous version. The reason there's only 1 is because there has only been 1 change since all of the previous versions have run. So if I open this, we can see it is blank because this is the one that's looking in the previous version at 1652. which is when the file was initially created. However, this one is at 1915, and this has the test. So if you're wondering why not all the files seem to have previous versions, it's because it likely hasn't changed. But the way to check that they are still running is to go to Properties on the actual data drive, come to Shadow Copies, and you can see a list of all of the shadow copies, and then the previous versions on the Previous Versions tab. What you can also do is click one of the previous shadow copies and then press Revert, and this will revert all of the files. Click here if you want to revert the volume, and then press Revert Now. And we can see that has now started to revert, and it has just finished. So if we press OK, we can come in, go to the technology, and we can see that that test file has gone, and then it is now back to being blank, which is how it was originally. So that is a very quick overview of volume shadow copies and how they can be used on Windows Server 2022.